Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome back to Tekpon. Today our guest is Abhi, the CEO of
Dyte.io.
Dyte.io. Okay. Uh, how are you?
I'm fine, Christian. Thank you so much for having me here. It's really nice to meet you.
Please tell us what your company does.
So, in very simple words, we create tools that allow people to integrate real-time audio video calls within their products. So, how we're having this call on Zoom right now, if
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to build an entire, you know, Tekpon app which is where you get your guests, which is where it's custom branded, which is where you record it. So we provide SDKs which let people integrate real-time calls, audio, video within their products. That's what we do.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense. It makes sense. So that's the biggest problem that you solve?
Yep, and we actually let you do it in like a couple of hours rather than the traditional way to do it is, you manage all the edge cases around streams. So the technology that powers all of this is something called WebRTC. And typically, WebRTC is a challenging technology to work with because it's fairly complicated. Plus, you don't have a lot of people who can actually work with WebRTC. So, with most of the other existing solutions, the biggest pain point is you still have to manage low level logic in a very nitty gritty part of it. So you have to figure out how to work with streams, what codecs to use, what is the best configuration, and it can go anywhere from 6 months to a year for a customer to go live.
Mm-hmm.
Which what we do is we ideally manage all of that, bundle it up, and give you a very simple SDKs and APIs to integrate, which is more or less built for web developers or mobile developers as the end user and not video engineers.
Mm-hmm.
So we do the video heavy lifting, we fine tune everything, and you can actually go live with us in less than 5 to 10 lines of code in less than like an hour of work actually. So that is how fast you can integrate with us, which is typically 6 month cycle or a 1 year cycle. So
So
yeah, that.
a non-technical person wouldn't be able to use your product.
So there are ways to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but we are fairly developer centric. So if you just want to integrate a call in your app, yes, there are ways. So we have a dashboard which is completely no code, where you can create an app where you can, customize it, change the colors, design the layout, and
Mm-hmm.
then just one click will help you create a meeting. But eventually, when you want to have that meeting within your app, you will need someone to integrate it. So that tiny part is where I would say, yes, you will need someone who knows where to place it. But that's pretty much it.
Hmm. And how big is your market for this need?
So let me put it this way: that video is a growing market, right? So majority of the content on the internet today is video. You've seen the boom with, TikTok, with Instagram, with everyone going video first. Plus, new industries have emerged, right? Live shopping as an experience, remote workplaces as an experience. Uh, then there are creator economy startups that are completely catering to people like yourself, right? Hey, we build tools for people to create better podcasts because currently the setup majorly that happens on videos heavily zoom oriented, and what we are doing is letting people think beyond that, right? Think outside the box of what's actually possible with live video. You are so used to this that hey, there's person A, person B, and that's how a podcast setup is. But why not have you in the corner, me on the bottom left, a very different experience going on in the center? So that is what we are working on, right? So for us, it's a heavily growing market. Plus, there are emerging industries like metaverse itself, where the entire underlying communication, which will be primarily audio and video, is what we will be powering, right? So for us, it's a heavily growing market. So I wouldn't want to put like a absolute number and just say that, hey, this is how big the market is.
I
It
didn't want
pretty,
numbers. I was curious about how the market grows.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Please tell us some of your integrations. I saw that you can use Java, but what other programming languages?
So we actually support all web and mobile platforms. So we have a base. The way Dyte SDK is structured is there is a core library. The idea of the core library is it does all the edge cases case handling all the business logic in terms of how do I get the stream? How do I get a video stream for a user? How do I get their audio stream? How do I manage it? How do I decide who to show on the screen? How do I choose between active speakers? What to do when the speaker switches? How do I convey messages? All of that. So that's our core library, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, we have something called UI kit. Now, the idea of a UI kit is we give you pre-built UI,
Okay.
so you can either use that, which is a very simple call UI, where there's a basic grid, there's a chat on the right, there's a bottom bar which has controls with screen share, speaker, mic, like switching speaker, mic, all of those devices, all of those controls there.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we have an entire design library which is built component wise. What that means is either you can use the entire pre-built and
Okay.
just change, let's say, the theme, the color, and a bit of it, or you can actually build your entire UI. What that entails is you can change everything from the font family to the font size, all the way up to creating your own custom bar. If you wanted to create a grid which has only 4 people at any given time, you can do that. If you wanted to have the chat not on the left but floating on the top right, you can do that. So the idea with that design libraries, and I'd like to show you that also, is that you basically can create components. So think of it like a Wix or a Webflow for creating apps around audio video, where
Mm-hmm.
you have all these things built and you can choose what you want to use and quickly mock up things, right? So
Okay.
that's the framework that we operate with. Currently, we serve all major JavaScript frameworks, so React, Angular, Vue.js, and Vanilla.js, obviously. So that covers pretty much the entire web stack. And on mobile, we have native SDKs for Android, iOS, and then Flutter and React Native.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much all platforms across mobile and web. The plan is to soon support native. We also have an Electron SDK, which lets you build desktop apps, right? The next action item for like two of the things is, one is native desktop apps, right? Not Electron desktop apps. And lastly, Unity SDKs, because they are the ones that go into a lot of these games that we would want to power, right? So that's the current uh, landscape, and what is the next plan for the next SDKs for us.
Mm-hmm. And can you share with us some use cases, some
Yeah,
companies that used your product and successfully?
happily.
Yeah.
So let me just quickly. Oh, my screen sharing is disabled. Would you be able to allow me to do that,
Uh,
or do you just want me to give you names?
yeah. No, no, no names. Just to understand the product better.
Okay, so
It's easy.
we
It's easier.
right. So we work with a company called. Like, I'll give you a few use cases and then names
You
for that.
can say the name. It's up to you.
No, no, that's totally all right. So these are publicly listed companies for us, so that's perfectly all right, right?
Perfect.
So we work with companies like Newton School, Skill Link, Board Infinity. These are customers which are serving for EdTech, right? They do either upskilling, where they get a batch of students, they train them, they upgrade their skills, and then they help them get placed. We also work with a bunch of interview as a service companies, where you you want to hire, let's say, 100 people this month. Now you can't take those many interviews because your product team gets blocked. So a good way is you hire someone who will do these interviews, the first few rounds for you, and these will be done live by vetted people who have the credentials to actually interview for a role, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
work with interview as a service companies, and a few of them in that side, something like Interview Vector, Job Twine, all of these. Beyond that, we also work with virtual event platforms, right? So during COVID, a lot of these events came online. So there are companies which do things like how Hopin works. Similarly, they create virtual experiences. So we also power the infra for a lot of those virtual events platform. And one of the good use cases for us is also telehealth, connecting doctors and patients, right? Just simply
Nice.
on a call for a consulting. And one of the most growing use cases that we're seeing is actually something that I'm also personally more interested in, is creator economy. So
Okay.
there are companies who are building for creators, where, let's say, someone like you can come and monetize your audience, or create more content in a much better streamlined manner, and we power a lot of those companies. So yeah, that's where we are serving the kind of customers we serve.
Nice. And how are the pricing? How is the pricing for your product?
So our pricing is purely usage based, right? Now let me explain how that works. Let's say two of us are speaking on this call for half an hour. So
Mm-hmm.
we consume 30 into 2, 60 user minutes, right? So we basically charge you based on the number of minutes of video that's consumed via us, right? So if it's a five people call goes on for an hour, that's 60 into 5, 300 user minutes. And the way it's calculated is pretty simple. It's the sum of the duration of total minutes consumed by everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if a five people call where for the first half an hour only four people were present and the next half an hour all five were present, you'll not be charged for the five for throughout the call. The way it will be like 4 into 30 plus 5 into 30, because it's essentially the sum of the usage for every single participant. And that's how we charge.
I understand. When did you start the company?
We actually started the company last year, somewhere close to September
Mm-hmm.
2020. So we officially, we had just started, ideating on the idea, uh, actually, end of 2020. And sorry, I said last year, I meant last to last year. We started ideating on the idea around end of August. And that's when we had actually applied to Y Combinator as well.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time the confirmation came, it was close to November. And we had just started building the product out and it had started to shape up. And we essentially kind of were still in the building phase throughout Y Combinator.
Mm-hmm.
So we recently announced a seed and everything as well. But we had raised that money during Y Combinator. We stayed in, under the radar, kept building, worked with a few design partners. Last year, May, we started working with a few, April, May, we launched in a very close loop, work with people to build it out and start ship the product out publicly this year, Jan, right? And since then, we've been like starting to scale up.
So to understand better, you started, and after how many months you joined the Y Combinator?
So for us, we actually started end of August. We applied for YCombinator. No, started actually end of August ideating on
Mm-hmm.
this. Started working on it somewhere mid-September, and that's when we applied to Y Combinator,
Okay.
and we got confirmation of
And
the
and
interview
this
in
this gave you
November.
a boost of confidence, right?
Definitely, definitely. One of
And
the best things that happened for
how
us.
was your experience at Y Combinator?
So, okay, we did a purely remote batch, right, due to the restrictions that were there. But so for me, I would say that this is our first company, right, for all three founders. We're fairly young, right? I'm 25, my co-founders are also 25, 26, right? So kind of like the first company we built, not a lot of startup experience per se, or connects in the industry. Y Combinator basically leveled that playing field for us, right? It gave us that stamp of credibility. That was definitely one of the things that helped us. The second was that because you're in a batch full of people who are so extremely performant, that they are striving to keep outdoing themselves, right? That motivation gets to you itself, right? In such an environment, you end up working at a pace which is unrealistic and you never thought you will be able to do it, right? So we were able to build out the entire first version of the product throughout the batch, and that was done with just the three founders and a team of three more members, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where two of them were college interns, right? So that is the kind of thing we work with in a very lean manner. That definitely helps. So it was a boost of confidence. It was also a stamp of credibility, and we got exposed to the world in a manner where we now could have reached out to our customers in a much better manner, because YC was something that happened.
Mm-hmm. So you totally recommend it to other founders.
I do. So there is a slide. This thing, I never give blind recommendations for anything, right?
Okay.
Um, if you ask me this question that, hey, will you do YC again? Uh, it will depend on where I am in that journey, right?
Yeah, because you're at
So,
the beginning and it helped a lot.
yeah, exactly, right? Like, so you have to evaluate what is it that you're looking for, right? For us, it was very clear that we were getting a stamp of credibility more than anything, right? More than everything else that
Yes.
YC has. We obviously got a solid network, but today I'm a part of that network anyway, right? I will be a YC founder no matter what for the rest of my life. So I have access to that network for the rest of my life, right? I know the right people I want to reach out to. I can reach out to them today, regardless of me being in the batch or not, right? The network, the connects that I made, the mentors I have, I know I can reach out to them whenever I want to for help when I need it, right? So in a situation like that, I will consider based on when I'm starting and what is it that I'm doing, that does that make sense or not. But for people, if the question is this is your first round and you're in a stage where you're in the beginning, where you're starting, you are either very early days of the product, or just out of the idea phase where you're validating things and you get the opportunity to do YC, I would heavily recommend that you do it. But beyond that, I'm more than happy to discuss and give my thoughts on what I would consider if I were in your shoes at the stage you are at.
Yeah, absolutely. It depends. And you raised the seed round of 11 million, right?
Yep, $11.6 million.
And what are your future plans? What do you plan to do with that money? How do you plan to grow your company?
So one of the first things we always realized is that money coming in is more of a catalyst. It's an enabler, right? The core thing that we need to do is build a team ground up that's resilient to the market. Like last year the market was super hot. We saw that there were good rounds happening, there was a lot of money flowing in, and right now there is a pullback in the market. We are seeing people worried about it, valuations crashing. There's a huge recession that's there, and that's clearly evident that it's going to happen, right? So one of the things we realize is we need to build a very strong foundation. And being an engineer myself, and all three of us are from an engineering background, all of us have coded for the most of our lives. And the core thing that we believe in is that build a strong product, and everything else will follow around it, right? But build a product, when I say strong product, not a blindly product that you believe is a good product, but something that the market needs and solves it excellently well, right? So solve that, solve a real problem statement, and build something that people want to use. Not so there is this
The
advice
motto.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
people often confuse, and there's this advice that say, hey, build something that you want to use yourself, right? That's very misguiding, because half the time the way you limit yourself, you actually don't realize what you are giving up on, right? So um, that is something that we believed in. So one of the major investment from that money is going to be in building a strong team, right? So a core product engineering, which is what we have built till now, and further scale that. And the other part of it, majority of it, is going to go into also being able to create a brand presence, right? Because no matter how, I think we as engineers are skewed to believe that the good product always win, but that's not always the case. It's not ever going to happen that, hey, just because you're a good product, you're always going to win. People need to know you're the good product. People need to know you're the best product. And that is a very heavy function of how your sales and marketing works. Definitely, you need to have a kick-ass core to be able to market it well. But then you should also know how to present it, how to position it, how do you find your voice in the market, right?
Hmm.
And the next part of the investment goes there, right? Like building that sales marketing engine for us, basically figuring out the GTM strategy and setting things up for that. Lastly, a bunch of it will go into future R&D. As a
Hmm.
tech product, we need to not just follow the market trends, but be able to define it, right? What we built when we built Dyte, when we started, the way we described how shifting from the traditional stream-based approach that people had in the media industry, like in the at least communication industry, to something where it was more of a room-based approach. What we decided was that, hey, instead of handling individual audio video streams and channels, why not just ask people to, hey, there's a room, connect people to the room, and then you just define on a business logic that ABC is connected on video, DEF is connected on audio only, maybe other people are connected on just a consumption. And that drastically changed the way people implemented it, because now that was basically architecting what you need rather than trying to solve the nitty-gritties of it, and then letting us do the nitty-gritty part, letting us do the dirty work. um, and that is something that we are seeing a lot of our competitors and a lot of the market trying to adopt now and pick that up. The other thing that we innovated on, and is still something that is a core USP to us, is something called plugins. The
Hmm.
whole idea was that as a communication, the first part is interaction, but what follows just after that is collaboration. The whole reason we are on this call right now is because we're talking about it. But now the next step would be that we can collaborate and build things together, work on things together. How a basic thing like a whiteboard solves for so many things when you on a call. We thought that the idea of adding such collaborative real-time apps should not be complicated. So we built an entire infra around it, which lets people build their own real-time collaborative apps on top of their communication stack. So now a doctor patient is not just a video call anymore. It's a video call with, let's say, the patient report being open, where both of them can work on the things. An X-ray that is being gone through, and the doctor can explain to the patient what's happening. Or an EdTech class where, let's say, you're teaching me coding. There's a live code editor which both of us can collaborate on, right? So things like that. So those are, let's say, industry defining things, right? Which is what we innovated on. And a majority of our money will also go in that part, which is defining what is actually possible with audio video and how you can make, how you can build better experiences. Because if you remember, the first thing I said was, hey, people are very limited by what we already have. A lot of people can't think outside of it because most of them don't know if it's possible. That's what we want to change. We want you to, move outside that boundary of, hey, a call is just a call, to actually make it an entire collaborative experience, right? So yeah, so as you said, right, like the idea of plugins, making that innovative apps, right? So what we want to do is push the boundary of what's possible with real-time audio video, right? Like how you can actually leverage communication to make it better, how you can do much better sales calls on it, how you can support customers better with real-time communication, right? How you can have a much better and much more immersive teaching experience. The whole idea is to be able to leverage this communication stack and build products that are 10x better for our end users, right? And they can eventually, like our customers can deliver that 10x better experience for their end users. So a lot of that is the innovation part, and that's where we want to spend a lot of our time as well.
Yeah.
And money, of course.
I can now see there are a lot of possibilities. So thank you for your explanation. It now makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And can you tell us a bit about your story? So how did you come to start a company? You had no experience. Why did you do that?
So I come from business family, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
a small business family here in India, and I have always loved technology. Like I've always been passionate about it. That's why I did my bachelor's, undergrad in computer science. Started coding, worked through it. My co-founders Kushagra and Palash, I've known them I think for almost 8 years and 6 years respectively now, and we worked throughout college together, right? So for me, two things were very clear. One, that I do want to build a massive business, which is a tech first business, right? Like not one of those traditional brick and mortar businesses, because this is something I'm passionate about, and I have seen the power of technology and the way it can drastically change lives, right? What we are doing actually helps do a lot of things at scale, which would not have been possible if infra like this does not exist, right? So that is definitely one of the motivating factors for it. The other is I knew who I wanted to start working with, right? So I knew that I will work with Kushag and Palash throughout college. We've worked together, done a lot of projects and all. And there's this funny thing. Every couple of months, I would call them and be like, "Hey, do you want to work on this?" And they're like, "Hey, let's figure out." Then what finally had happened is I had quit my job in March 2020 because I had planned to go for my master's and I had my admit at UC Berkeley for a program that I wanted, right? And it is one of the top rank. Like so, most other places, it's the number one ranked college, the Haas Business School for the course that I wanted to do. And then the whole idea was that I took that 1 year gap, thinking that hey, I will, explore, learn more, see around, and then the pandemic happened right in our faces. So all of this got accelerated, right? So then started again ideating through things that we can make better. And one of the things we saw that hey, video as a use case is increasing drastically, and that's something that can be made much better, right? Like we always felt that it lacked a lot of things, and the idea was that that is something that we should be able to deliver at scale, the kind of experience we would want to have. And that's how we started, right? Now coming to your question about the experience part, right? Well, for us, if it would not have been video, it would have been something else, because all of us are builders at heart. We know that we'll be able to build things, solve for things. It was about choosing what to do, and
I
it just
understand.
made
Yeah.
sense to do that because the market was right, the timing was right,
Mm-hmm.
everything was just very obvious. Plus, after YC, there was a stamp of validation as well. And when we started, I had to take a tough call about, hey, do I continue this or do I, go to my dream college? But it had been the last one
Yeah.
and a half years after graduating. My plan was that I wanted to do those masters. That's everything that I had worked towards, right? And then that call was finally like, hey, you know what? Let's do this, because worst case this doesn't work out, we still learn a lot more than I would practically do there. And get, so do the masters, get a cushy job, versus learn this, because we're very young, right? It is the age where we can take risks and actually go
Absolutely.
through it. And it was just the risk reward ratio that just made sense, right? So that's the background story.
Lovely, lovely. What's your favorite software?
That's a very blatant question. You'll have to you'll have to narrow it down in what area, right? Like, so, for example, one of the most used tools for me internally at work is Slack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, So I wouldn't say I'm absolutely in love with Slack, but I can't imagine my life without it. Right. So it's that where you can't function today. The other is definitely WhatsApp. Again, India is a very WhatsApp heavy country, right? So
Hmm.
for a lot of our customers, we actually have WhatsApp as a channel of communication, especially in India, which is something surprising for a lot of folks outside because that is not something that comes naturally, right?
Yes.
That line of personal and professional life gets very blended here. So I would say WhatsApp is one of the strong ones. So personally, like these are the ones that I use most on the day-to-day basis. For email, I use Superhuman. I would say fairly good, fast for me. And again, one of those things where you get hooked into it, it's tough to leave now. Uh, as a software, I think Figma is really powerful.
Hmm.
Um, and the other tool that we use, at least I actively use with my product and design team, is Webflow. And what is one thing we realize is using these two effectively made our productivity go heavily in a upward trajectory, right? So uh, we were able to do prototypes much better, much faster in a manner that made sense, and we were able to deliver things and test out very quickly, right? So these are things I would definitely say something that used to using. Uh, Beyond that, for me as I'm one of the co-founders and CEO. Um, the tools that I would prefer personally would be more around the idea of dashboarding. So anything that where I can see a much clearer picture of how the numbers look like, how the pipelines look like. For me, that's a personal bias. But from a very realistic point where I said, like, if I had to just choose blindly, Figma and Webflow are absolutely amazingly well-designed products, have a very good design element to it as well, have a very good usability element to it. And you've firsthand seen the experience.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us today?
Not really. I would say that, hey, okay, so if you are someone like me who's in that journey of starting up, today is a really tough time. And that's something because the market trend has drastically shifted. You will have a much harder time in building a team, hiring, going to market, and even selling a product. So I would say this is a good time to double down on what you think is the value prop of your company. Figure out if that is actually true and are people willing to pay for it in a market like this? Because if they are, you will have a great time when the markets get better. So that is definitely one. I wouldn't say that blind blanket statement that hey, keep at it, go at it. I would say think smartly through it, figure out few metrics, validate them, and then decide how do you want to move forward. That's definitely one. The other is more about no matter what you do, make sure that you build a very internally strong company because you will realize the importance of building a company that sticks together versus just a company that hey, we've hired top shots everywhere and now we think they'll solve everything. That
Yeah.
rarely works out, right? And lastly, be patient. This is something that I need to mention explicitly for everyone at least, because and that's something it's also a little hard for us to follow every now and then because you see everyone around you with the news. And I would like to mention that media will always over glorify the good news. You don't see that for every one startup that raises, there are 99 that could not. For every one startup that's doing well, there are hundreds which are failing every day and figuring out what to do. So don't compare yourself with the news that you see every day, day in and day out. A lot of it is very misguiding. Um, you have to remember that's your journey, and you will take a very different path. Your end goal is different, so focus on that because with the exposure we have with the amount of content out there, the social media that we have today, it's good, but it also has a very very negative impact on you because people start feeling like shit if that something doesn't work out in the first go. And trust me, most of the things don't work out in the first go. It's much later you realize that you actually were in an iterative process, right? So that's what I would say, that be patient with yourself, be patient with what you're doing, take bets and stick with them, and don't like do things that you want to so that you don't at least end up regretting and blaming yourself for not trying. I would rather try, fail, and learn from it than not try and then regret that what if I had done that, right? So that's pretty much it.
What else can I say? You said it perfectly. Thank you so much for being here. I'm truly grateful, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here. Loved it. And for anyone who's listening and would love to integrate real time audio video, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm easily available on LinkedIn. You can email to me, abhishek@dyte.io, and I'll happily, love to connect and explore what you're building.
Thank you so much. Links are below. Bye bye.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye bye.